The desert wind screamed across the abandoned highway outside northern Arizona. Smoke curled into the dark sky as distant gunfire echoed through the mountains. Captain Daniel Reeves tightened his grip on the helicopter controls. The radio crackled. On Falcon 1, civilians trapped inside Greystone Research Facility. Terrorist group has blocked all ground access. Local police unable to enter. Daniel looked through the cockpit glass at the burning valley below. How many civilians? A pause. 32 confirmed, including children. Daniel's jaw tightened. His co-pilot, Marcus Hale, turned toward him. "This feels wrong," Marcus whispered. "Intel said the area was clean." Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, it was a setup. The military Black Hawk helicopter heavy smoke as thunder rolled above the mountains. Below them, abandoned military trucks burned beside the highway. Armed terrorists moved through the valley carrying assault rifles and portable missile launchers. Greystone facility appeared ahead, a large concrete building surrounded by cliffs. Half the structure was already on fire. Inside the building, terrified civilians huddled in darkness while explosions shook the walls. A little girl covered her ears as dust fell from the ceiling. Mom, are we gonna die?" Her mother forced a trembling smile. "No, sweetheart, someone's coming." Outside, armed terrorists positioned explosives near the entrances. Their leader, Viktor Orlov, watched the building through binoculars. Former mercenary. Cold eyes. No emotion. They want these witnesses alive. One terrorist said. Viktor lowered the binoculars. Not anymore. Back in the helicopter, warning alarms suddenly screamed. Marcus looked at the radar. A missile lock! A rocket exploded behind them, shaking the helicopter violently. Daniel pulled hard left. Hold on. The Black Hawk dropped dangerously close to the canyon wall as sparks burst from the rear engine. Marcus fired defensive flares. Another missile streaked past the cockpit. Daniel breathed hard. They knew we were coming. The helicopter disappeared behind cliffs as terrorists searched the skies. Inside Greystone facility, former Army medic Sarah Bennett tried calming the trapped civilians. "We stay together," she said. "No panic." A teenage boy pointed toward the windows. "They're planting bombs." Fear spread through the room. Sarah looked at the terrified children, injured workers, and elderly civilians trapped beside her. Then she heard it. Helicopter blades. Hope. Outside, Daniel landed briefly behind a rocky ridge nearly half a mile from the facility. Marcus stared at the damaged engine. "We can't stay airborne long." Daniel grabbed his rifle. "Then we finish this fast." You're walking into an ambush." Daniel looked toward the burning facility. They don't have time." Rain began pouring from the sky as Daniel and Marcus moved through the canyon under darkness. Lightning flashed above the cliffs while terrorists searched the area with flashlights. Suddenly, gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into rocks around them. A contact left. Marcus fired back while Daniel dragged an injured deputy sheriff behind cover. "You okay?" Daniel asked. The deputy nodded painfully. "They came out of nowhere. There's more inside the facility perimeter." Daniel looked toward the distant building. Smoke poured from broken windows. Then he heard children screaming. His expression changed instantly. "We move now." The soldiers pushed through heavy gunfire toward Greystone facility. Terrorists fired from rooftops and vehicles while explosions echoed through the valley. Marcus took down 2 attackers near the entrance. Daniel kicked open a damaged side door. Inside was chaos. Sprinklers flooded the hallways. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lights flickered red. Terrified civilians rushed toward them. "Army, thank God!" Daniel guided them toward safety. Stay low. Follow the exit markers." Sarah Bennett stepped forward holding an injured child. "There are more people trapped downstairs." Daniel looked at Marcus. Marcus sighed. "Of course there are." The building shook violently. A nearby explosion collapsed part of the ceiling. Daniel grabbed emergency gear. Marcus, escort civilians to extraction point. What about you?" Daniel checked his rifle. "I'm getting the rest out." Sarah looked at him. "You can't go alone." "I can. I'm coming." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. The two disappeared deeper into the burning facility. Downstairs, thick smoke covered the research level. Emergency alarms screamed nonstop. Bodies of security guards lay near shattered doors. Sarah covered her mouth. Oh my God, Daniel noticed something strange. The terrorists weren't stealing anything. They were destroying evidence. Computer servers burned across the room while documents scattered through flooded hallways. Suddenly, footsteps echoed nearby. Daniel raised his weapon. A frightened scientist emerged from hiding. Please don't shoot. Hey, Daniel lowered the rifle. How many left? 6 people trapped in Laboratory C. An explosion rocked the hallway. Dust filled the air. The scientists panicked. They planted bombs everywhere. Daniel looked toward the collapsing corridor. We're running out of time. They reached Laboratory C. The electronic door was jammed shut. Inside, trapped civilians pounded desperately against the glass. Daniel tried forcing the door open. Nothing. Sarah spotted emergency oxygen tanks nearby. Move. Daniel stepped back. Sarah fired one shot into the control panel. Sparks exploded. The door slowly opened. The trapped civilians rushed out crying. But then automatic gunfire erupted from behind them. Terrorists. Daniel shoved civilians behind cover while returning fire down the hallway. 3 attackers advanced through smoke wearing night vision goggles. Bullets shattered glass everywhere. Daniel eliminated 1 attacker. Marcus suddenly appeared from another hallway firing heavily. Miss me? Daniel smirked briefly. You were supposed to leave. Yeah, well. Helicopter's getting worse. Another explosion shook the building. Marcus looked upward. We have maybe 5 minutes before this place collapses. The civilians hurried upstairs while Daniel covered the rear. But Victor Orlov stepped from the smoke holding a rifle. Calm. Unshaken. You should have stayed away, Captain. Daniel recognized him instantly. A Belarus border operation. Well, fine. Victor smiled slightly. You remember, Marcus whispered quietly. You know this guy? Daniel kept his eyes locked forward. He kills civilians for leverage. Victor fired suddenly. Gunfire exploded across the hallway. Daniel and Marcus returned fire while civilians escaped upstairs. The firefight became brutal in close range. Sparks flew from metal walls. Smoke burned their lungs. Then Marcus cried out. A bullet tore through his shoulder. Daniel dragged him behind cover. Oh, you hit bad. Marcus forced a grin through pain. I'm not dead yet. Victor's voice echoed through the hallway. You can't save them all. Daniel looked at the injured civilian struggling upstairs, then at Marcus bleeding heavily, then at the burning facility collapsing around them. He made his choice. Sarah, he shouted. She looked back. Get everyone to the helicopter. What about you? Daniel reloaded his rifle. I'll hold them here. Marcus grabbed his arm. You stay, you die. Daniel looked at his best friend quietly. Then make sure they don't. For a second, neither man spoke. Years of missions, wars, brotherhood. Marcus finally nodded, then helped civilians escape upstairs. Daniel moved alone through the smoke-filled corridor. Gunfire echoed around him. One against many, he set explosive charges across support pillars and fuel containers. If the terrorists wanted the facility destroyed, he'd bury them with it. Outside, heavy rain hammered the canyon while civilians boarded the damaged helicopter. The engine sputtered violently. Sarah looked around desperately. Where's Captain Reeves? Marcus stared toward the burning building. No answer. Inside the facility, Victor and his remaining men advanced carefully through darkness. Then Daniel's voice echoed through the speakers. You should have left when you had the chance. Boom! Explosion ripped through the lower floor. Fire consumed the hallway behind the terrorists. Victor shouted angrily as debris collapsed around them. Daniel fired from above, forcing them backward into the flames. One terrorist fell. Another disappeared beneath collapsing concrete. But Victor escaped deeper into the facility. Daniel pursued him through burning corridors until both reached the rooftop access. Rain poured heavily outside. Lightning illuminated the mountain cliffs. Victor aimed his rifle. You think America remembers soldiers like you? Daniel slowly raised his weapon. I'm not here for medals. Gunfire exploded simultaneously. Both men fired. Victor stumbled backward after taking a bullet to the chest. Daniel fell hard against the rooftop wall, wounded badly in the side. Victor laughed painfully while collapsing. The buildings finished. Below them, explosions spread rapidly through the structure. Daniel looked toward the helicopter, preparing for takeoff. Civilians were alive. Safe. That was enough. But then he heard something faint through the storm. A child crying. Daniel froze. Not everyone escaped. He forced himself up despite the pain and rushed back inside the collapsing building. Downstairs near the flooded stairwell, a little boy was trapped beneath fallen metal beams. The child cried helplessly. Daniel ignored the fire surrounding them. He lifted the heavy debris with everything left in his body. The boy crawled free. Can you walk? The child nodded tearfully. Daniel carried him through collapsing hallways as flames exploded around them. The exit was close, but the ceiling suddenly crashed behind them, blocking the path. Daniel looked around desperately, then spotted a maintenance ladder leading toward the roof. Smoke filled his lungs as he climbed carrying the child. Every step hurt. Every breath burned. Outside, Marcus saw movement through the smoke. Oh my God! Daniel emerged onto the rooftop holding the boy. The entire facility began collapsing beneath them. Marcus shouted from the helicopter door, "A jump!" The helicopter hovered dangerously close despite failing engines. Rain blasted across the canyon. Daniel looked down. Too far. The rooftop cracked beneath his feet. Marcus reached outward desperately. Daniel! The building began collapsing entirely. Daniel wrapped one arm around the child, then jumped. For one terrifying second, they disappeared into smoke and darkness. Marcus grabbed the child first. Sarah pulled Daniel aboard moments before both nearly fell into the canyon below. The helicopter barely stabilized. Warning alarms screamed continuously. One engine failed completely. Marcus grabbed the controls. "We're not going to make long distance." Daniel, bleeding heavily, looked back at the collapsing facility disappearing into flames. Victor and the terrorists were gone. The civilians were alive. Mission complete. The little boy held Daniel's hand tightly. "Are you a hero?" Daniel looked at the frightened child, then at the exhausted civilians surrounding him. Finally, he smiled weakly. "No." The helicopter disappeared into the stormy night as emergency vehicles approached from distant highways. Below them, flames consumed the valley. But above the mountains, 32 civilians survived because one pilot refused to leave them behind. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the storm, the sound of helicopter blades faded into silence.